As a coach, it's important to kind of reinforce that people are doing a good job, but praise is not the push. All right, welcome back to the Menlo Experience. This is episode 2. It's been a little bit since we did our last episode, but I'm your host, Brad Sant, CEO with Kyle Bach, COO. What are your thoughts since the last episode?
Well, we started this podcast to talk about conversations that were happening behind closed doors. And one of the conversations you and I have had these last couple of weeks was talking about the first podcast that we released and feedback on it. And I was talking to you and we started talking about it. And I was giving myself feedback like, Kyle, shut up. Stop saying yes and verbal affirmations after every single one of these things. And but it's been fun kind of talking about the podcast. What did you think about yourself? Do you have any feedback for yourself on it?
Well, I was just thinking as you said that, leave it to us to just talk about ourselves after the podcast. But anyway, first one, was really interesting. I was out of town and had it up on the laptop with the first edit.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there thinking, man, I shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that. And it got me thinking about game film, right?
Yeah.
You look at a sports team, they review film from the game, and really for 3 reasons: to prepare, to kind of make adjustments during the game, and then learn after the game what they could have improved on. So I'm sitting here watching this, and I can't tell you how many times we talked about this, we talked about that, right?
I think I just said that like 30 seconds ago.
we gotta learn, but really that's how you get better. So watching the film, watching the first edits, gave me an opportunity to kind of reflect on the business.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there thinking, what's our game film? What do we have in the business that we can look at to both prepare, make adjustments when it happens, and I guess third, do a post after action review, whatever you want to call it, to improve.
Yeah, we talked last week about the quarterback series, and we talked about just a lot of different parts of that. But in the quarterback series, when they're talking about watching game tape and everything, or when Patrick Mahomes is on the field and he's watching the plays on a regular basis, he's seeing what he sees from the field, but then he's going back to the sideline. And then on the sideline, he's sitting down last year at Bieniemy, and he's sitting down on the sideline and he's watching tape and he's talking to the coach and he's getting immediate feedback on the drive that he just did. But I was thinking about game tape and thinking about they watch game tape before the game to get ready for the game. Then they watch it during the game to get immediate real feedback, AWS stat that version, right? And then they, on the Microsoft Surface tablets, I don't know if Microsoft ever is going to sponsor something, but, we've got all these different situations, right? And then after the game, they're watching game tape again. And then we were at the Chiefs luncheon today, and they were talking about the morning after the Chiefs parade this year, they were in watching game tape.
Yeah, Brett Veach and team were already in watching film, tape, preparing for the draft and combine.
Yeah.
So, what's amazing is, and I know we've talked about this, I'm doing that on purpose, but So
are we going to count?
We're going to start counting, right?
We're going to start counting. Yeah. Okay, that was twice.
But Untold Johnny Football, right?
Yeah.
So we see Pat Mahomes and literally on the sidelines before games, all of this preparing, and then you got Johnny Manziel, who literally has never watched film in his life.
Yeah.
And take somebody with lots and lots and lots of talent that didn't put in the effort, didn't try and get better, didn't study, and I think most of us know how he turned out, but made it to the Browns for half a season and washed out.
It's wild. There were 22 picks in front of him though, and so the conversation and what we're learning is you and I like watching sports documentaries also.
Yes, right.
So, but we're there are 22 teams that picked ahead of Johnny Manziel, who won the Heisman that year. But they did their due diligence and they found out the guy never once watched film during all of college. So he never got, he had this raw natural talent, but there were a lot of people that saw in advance, 22 teams that saw in advance, and probably a large number of other ones that saw in advance that he was, that's not how you get to the next level. And, and so when you think about it from a business standpoint, when you think in our world, in your world, what's some of the game tape? What's some of the film that we watch, just to get better for us on a daily basis?
Well, you mentioned the stat that. So telemetry data, real time, as much information that we can get in terms of our system to take a look at that, right? So we have call logs, real-time call stats. We have ticket stats. We know how long something's been waiting on a particular technician or how long it's been waiting on a particular customer to respond to us. We have all of these telemetry pieces of data.
Yeah.
But data is worthless if you don't use it as well, right? So, I think there's a little bit of that. We also have project plans that, we should be studying before we go into a client, know exactly what we're going to do when we get on site, as opposed to show up and try and figure things out.
Right.
And I think we all know how that goes when
Yeah.
you do that. It's very inefficient, a lot of disjointed stuff. So I think our challenge is how do we take all of that data, all of those pieces of information, bring them together and be at the top of our game in what we do.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I was with Steve, and we were talking about, okay, let's look at our process when we bring on a new customer, a new client. And, what I want you to do, I was telling him, we were talking about this, and so we were talking about game tape, and I said, I want you to send me the email that we send to people right when they start off. And he he's like, all right, great. And I said, but I want you to treat me like I'm a customer. Like, treat me brand new. We just, signed a contract, and what do we do? What's our process from there? I want you to schedule a meeting. I want to go through the, how we walk people through things. And as we're walking through that, he came into my office a couple days later, and he's like, hey, just want to let you know, I was typing up the email that we should send, but turns out we don't have an email that we send. We just schedule a meeting, right?
Lovely.
And yeah, but it was interesting because unless you go and look at the game film, right? Like, unless you go back and look at, like, what are we actually doing, and you walk through those steps, you can't get better, right? And you've got to kind of face the truth, right? Patrick Mahomes is going back and watching that play that he throws an interception, right? But he's got to have short-term memory, and he's got to constantly have that desire to improve, the desire to get better, desire to, not let our status quo today be the status quo of tomorrow, right? And I love just taking a look at every element of what we're doing on a daily basis, and how do we take a look at that game film, that regular tape, both in advance of something and in real time, and then after the fact, right?
Well, to your point, we love sports documentaries talking about sports, but I also think of it in this, which is you can look at your own experience real time and you see certain things, right? You review it on film, you're going to probably see something completely different. And then if you have a coach there with you, or a third party, or a manager, or a leader, whatever, they're taking a look at that. They have a different angle, and they're seeing what they can help you improve with as well. So I think with your example there with Steve, a little bit of it is when you're just in it every day, sometimes you don't see that, and you got to step out and review that. And not only doing that yourself helps with that, but then also being a leader in those situations, doing that for your team really allows them to see things that maybe they don't see themselves.
Yeah. And it's amazing, Steve, the conversations we had after it, and the conversation about how do we improve this. I mean, it's night and day different now as a result moving forward, right? And it's interesting because I think some people can't take feedback, or can't truthfully maybe don't want to watch the tape because they don't want the feedback, right? They're maybe more insecure and they don't want input and things like that. And so you do sometimes, I think, have people that are maybe afraid to face it. And maybe that's part of the reason why they don't want to watch tape. And that wasn't him at all. He wanted the feedback, wanted the input, and and it's better now as a result.
Well, championship culture, we talked about that on the last podcast, and that's what we're after. And really, to build that, I think you have an interesting point, which is we need an entire team that's okay being vulnerable and taking a look at themselves and how they can improve.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There's a lot of strength in vulnerability and kind of just taking an outside look at yourself and how you can do that. And it's not necessarily easy, right? I mean, I've been there, and you don't want to deal with it, and you kind of put it out to the side. But when you really take a look at it, I think a lot of people will rise to the occasion and improve. It's more of the big hairy monster in the closet that they don't want to look at, and you figure out it's not there, then you can make a lot of strides.
Well, I mean, a coach is someone that makes you do what you don't want to do in order to become who you want to be, right? Like, and that's kind of always the quote I liked about coaching. But, you look at Eric Bieniemy and all the feedback he's been getting from the Commanders, right? And he's been getting all this negative feedback, and because he's working them too hard, so some of the players went to the gym and talked about during that time. But really, I mean, he has the mindset of a championship culture, and he's going to speak the truth to these guys. And you have Patrick and Kelsey, that are both like just defending Bieniemy because he just has high standards, and he sees in them what they can be, and wants to push them towards that. And, and I think you're going to see a totally different Commanders this year, as a result of that. And it's going to be because of his, pushing of guys that maybe didn't even know they had a whole nother level to get to.
Does that mean you're putting some bets on the Commanders this year?
I mean, I might have to. I don't know.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know. Their name. We still need a better
you
name.
got to put it here.
Commanders.
That's fine.
They got to up their
Yeah,
name.
but you put it out here on the podcast.
I did put it out here on the podcast.
Got to back it up now.
I guess that's going to be the case. All right, Commanders to the playoffs, and we'll put some kind of bet on this.
Yep. So one reason we wanted to have this podcast is because we have a lot of conversations behind closed doors in terms of thoughts. And we had a internal meeting, leadership meeting the other day, and we were talking a lot about, I think this relates to what we're talking about here, but praising people, right? And positive reinforcement, and that's good.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about it, I was reflecting though, and when we're trying to get better and we're trying to really make those strides, I made a comment the other day. Do you remember what it was? The praise is not the push.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
I think I told you to write that down
Yeah.
so that we could bring that here.
Yeah.
But yeah, the praise is not
Praise
the
is
push.
not
Tell
the
me
push.
about that.
So you can praise, but that doesn't push you to get to the next level, right? And as a coach, it's important to kind of reinforce that people are doing a good job. But praise is not the push. We also have to be able to have kind of tough conversations. And you mentioned the duty of a coach.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for as leaders, to have these deep kind of maybe uncomfortable conversations, but in a manner of respect and rapport that push people to the next level. And from kind of my reflection is, all-time praising is not the push.
When you reflect back on life, were there ever any moments that you had somebody that kind of pushed you in a way like that really kind of helped you, like some pivotal moments in your life that helped you go to that next level?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, honestly, as you asked me that question, my dad, number one, kind of called it as it was.
Yeah.
And he pushed me to get better. And I spent a lot of time. We had a family business growing up. And so that was a real good experience. But I can think of a soccer coach that was from overseas that I played for. And honestly, he didn't care. Yeah. It was all push. I mean, maybe no praise.
No praise.
Yeah, it was one of those.
Push.
But honestly, I can remember, it's 100 and some degrees here right now, and that's kind of the topic of the week. But I remember practicing this time of year, just out in the middle of the day, sweating like crazy. But really, we had a really strong soccer team because of it.
Yeah, I can connect or relate on both of those. My dad was always the one after every game, every sport that I played in, that was always, okay, here's what you did well, but here's some things you need to work on. And it's funny, after my 8-year-old son's soccer game this last weekend, I was like, okay, what went well, and what could we get better at, and basically, I don't think he had a single thing he thought he could get better at as an 8-year-old, right? And but he was out running around, and I was like, you hustled really well, man, you hustled. And so, but I remember I had a drill sergeant, soccer coach as well, and Chris Carbajo, and he pushed us hard. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that there was no praise from that coach. As I think back on some of the most intense coaches that I've had, it was mostly pushing, and it was mostly just, you can be better than this. And, there was just a higher bar that they kept setting in front of us. And, and I remember my college professor, Fred Burek, who was like the absolute hardest professor that I ever had. But I bumped into a friend of mine that was in the same course, and we were talking literally a month ago about, he was the hardest professor we all had. But man, we all learned probably more in that class than maybe 2 or 3 years of college. And he just had this higher standard, of excellence that he pushed everybody towards.
Were you like me and you're just cussing under your breath at this person? So, I walk through the office, and if I'm pushing somebody and I'm getting them to cuss at me under their breath, I mean, I feel like I'm doing a good job, right? I'm pushing.
It's funny because, I like when you really have the mentality that you believe we can be better, and you can be better. And I think when you truly believe that, and that's the foundation of the push, that we can be better, we can be greater, we can be excellent, we can be elevated, right? When you believe that, and you're truly talking to someone, and you believe there's more in them than they see in themselves. I mean, that's so empowering and energizing, and when that's the foundation of the push, I think that's where it's like silent praise, right? Because you're truly communicating that you believe there's more in them than they can see in themselves.
Well, and once they accomplish it, that's they have the internal praise and motivation, drive, because you feel accomplished now, right?
Yeah.
And did something you didn't think you
Yeah.
could do. Randomly, I was thinking about your example with Belichick and
Yeah.
Edelman.
Oh
Why don't
yeah.
you tell us the
Yeah.
story?
So Edelman was on the New Heights podcast, I think is where he said this, but he was talking about how Belichick, what he would do on game tape days. He was reflecting back on a time where he dropped a pass in the flat, just a quick out, and he dropped a pass in the flat. And the next Monday morning they went into the game tape, and Belichick had it queued up, and he just pressed play, and Edelman watched it. And then he just pressed play again, and Edelman watched it again, and just pressed play, watched it again. And then he started talking, like he just played it over and over again. And then he started talking like, there are tens of thousands of high school football players across the country that are 13 years old that can catch that pass on a regular basis. And then he pressed play again,
Drive it over and over.
just pressed on it, over and over again. And but I mean, you look at Edelman, and that's all he needed. That what he needed for proper motivation was like, and he probably dropped some passes, but I don't know if he didn't drop very many of those passes anymore after that. And you got to think his intensity to practice and drive, and I mean, just it changed after that, I bet.
So as a leader, one thing, or a coach, I guess in this case, is you have to know how to coach everybody, right? And you can't
Yeah.
coach everybody the exact same way. So for Edelman, that probably worked. I
Yeah.
mean, that just drove it under
Yeah.
his fingernail and just
Yeah.
hurt, right?
Yeah.
But that may not work for everybody, right?
Right.
So how do we adjust? We've talked about situational leadership. We've talked about, leading to the moment. How do we adjust as leaders as we grow our organization?
That's a good question, because we talk about a lot. Failure is going to happen, and we talk about if we're going to grow something significant and we want to bring an elevated experience. Failure is going to happen. Drop balls are going to happen, and there's going to be some people that are motivated like Edelman like that, and there's going to be some people that are motivated. That drop ball is going to drive them so nuts that you don't even have to bring it up again.
Right.
We've got some people on our team that you don't ever have to mention that. It's just going to drive them nuts. I made a mistake about a month ago I told you about, and we sent out an email with some typos, and that falls on me. I mean, I haven't stopped thinking about that darn email since we sent it out, right? And so like that's going to be something I don't need I don't even need that feedback. I'm going to, that's going to be something that is intrinsically driven. How do you think we approach that with different people?
Well, real quick before that, I just it made me think. One of my favorite interview questions is to think of a time, and I guess if you're going to come work for us, you better be prepared, right?
Yeah.
But think of a time when you were a child, or maybe teenager, and one of these mistakes that you just made that you remember like yesterday. And the interesting part about that is almost every single time, I can't think of a time when it hasn't, it draws emotion out of people, and it has affected who they become as they get to be an adult, right? So when you talk about core motivators, you talk about personality, those kind of cement in people's lives. And so just for me, it's really cool to understand where they came from and what those events are
Yeah.
that formed that. But, as leaders, I think we have to know our people. We have to take time, get to know them, have the conversation. And as kind of our staff and people in our organization, they need to provide that feedback and how they'd like to be managed. And so it's not a one-way street.
Right.
This is something we build. We also do what we call our product called Culture Index. And we use that to kind of understand what are people's motivators and where their thought processes are coming from.
Yeah, going through the culture index was really interesting. Just learning about kind of different motivators like that, and it is interesting thinking back on how do you become intrinsically motivated, right? And if that's your standard practice, you mentioned last time when we were talking in the podcast that elevated. Your definition of elevated. Do you remember what it was?
Continual improvement.
Yeah.
Hitting the bar.
Yeah.
Hitting it again.
He said once we hit that point, it's the next point.
Yep.
And I like that because I think you are really intrinsically driven, and I think that's really similar between the two of us. How did you really get that inner drive? And how do you keep it?
I think a little bit of that is probably upbringing, good or bad. My parents were really good about making me buy everything, earn it myself,
Yeah.
and instilling a good work ethic growing
Yeah.
up. And so I understood the value of that, and also understood kind of if I wanted it, I could go get it. And So it just kind of builds this hunger in you. And for me, we were talking about this earlier today. I'm doing that on purpose again, but
number 3.
yeah, number 3. So, but if you don't have a goal sitting out there, it's kind of hard to internally motivate yourself. And I think a lot of people have a perceived ceiling or a ceiling that they may hit and they just stop, right? So how do you break through that ceiling? How do you keep the goal out there? And I guess, my view, and maybe this is why I call myself crazy sometimes, I don't believe there's a ceiling. The word limitless is on my office wall, and that's the way I like to approach life, and thinking that there are no limits. It's just somebody hasn't done it before, or I haven't done it before. It's not that I can't do it, I haven't done it. So really, that's an internal reflection. If it's going to happen, I got to do it.
Yeah, when you were talking last week about the championship culture and setting goals and things like that, one of the things that it just stood out to me as I was listening to it was, I think that when you talk about winning, when you talk about dominating, is one of the words that I've heard you say over and over again, that you want to dominate, but that you feel like that's a little, too in, people's faces if people know that that's really how you want, to attack things. But I think a lot of times when you're saying you want to win or dominate, a lot of times what you're talking about is almost talking about dominating self, right? I want to win today over yesterday, and that self-improvement, or constantly being better than we were yesterday, even as a team. And it was less about dominating someone else or something else, but it was more about dominating yesterday. And is that true of you, or is that something that was I reading into that?
I think it's a little bit of dominating internally in terms of elevate, right? Hit the next level, hit the next level. I think it's also a little bit outward in terms of, I have a strong belief that it doesn't make a lot of sense to do something halfway, or partially, or give it a kind of a fetal attempt, right? Don't waste your time with those things. Focus on the things you're going to be really good about, really push hard at, and win. And that is just it's kind of my internal drive, my internal motivation. And we talked about it on the last podcast, but mediocrity, I hate it. I think it's poison. Let's go out and do something truly remarkable, and be the best at it.
Yeah, nothing's worse than average.
It kills me.
Status
I can't do
quo.
it. No, it drives me nuts.
Well, let's not change it, because we've always done it that way. It's like the most annoying.
Which is really interesting for the industry we're in. Education largely gets stuck in we've always done it this way. And even as we have prospective customers come and look at us, they just feel comfortable doing it the way they've always done it. And I had a call with one. We lost the deal, but had a call with one earlier this week, and we were talking about the way they've always done it, and they didn't want to make a change. And I kind of used money as the example. And I remember when I used to go to the bank and literally deposit my money, get my money out, and that's crazy nowadays. I mean, you've got digital, you got Venmo, you've got.
I remember when I had cash in my wallet.
Right. Right.
I mean,
so what seemed fearful at the time now is so much more convenient and has so many more attractive qualities. And I think that's a little bit about what we're doing here, and sometimes have to educate people on what the difference is.
Right. Yeah. I remember walking into the gas station to make a payment.
Could you imagine?
I remember when those came out. I also remember when Redbox happened, and we went to Redbox for the first time. I remember driving through, and I told Tracy, my wife, I told Tracy, I was like, that's a terrible idea, getting a video at McDonald's, and then it blew up into what it was, and now they missed the boat, and now it's Netflix. And we all stream online.
I read an article the other day. Oregon, I think, just finally passed a law that you can do self-serve gas now. It still was full service. I think there's 2 states in the. I was floored. I was absolutely floored. Go look it up. Hit Google and research it. But I'm pretty sure it was Oregon. Just now allows you to.
Congratulations, Oregon. Welcome to
gas.
The 21st century.
That's right. So anyway, neither here nor there.
Yeah, apparently I've never traveled to Oregon.
Yeah. So cybersecurity is a hot topic these days.
Yeah, you went to a convention over in Vegas. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Black Hat, which is kind of the de facto cybersecurity conference, at least large conference, just under 20,000 attendees at this event. And, I was just walking through there and hit the vendor floor, show floor.
Yeah.
And the first thing that stood out to me is, like, how could anybody try and manage this if you're a one-man shop?
Yeah.
It is just overwhelming.
Now, to put context to this event, You told me a little bit about this event that I think it would be really good for everybody to realize what you went to here.
Yeah.
So this Black Hat event, you said that you are not supposed to take a laptop with any company information on it at all because everyone at this event can hack you.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to tie into the Wi-Fi.
Yep.
And
So
you,
Black Hat and DEF CON, they're back to back. DEF CON is a little bit more of the intense security, get yourself hacked. But yeah, the number of security professionals, it's just kind of talk that you don't want to take your good device out there. Use something that you're not going to get hacked on. So.
yeah. Yeah. So that's the event that you're going to and walking through and looking at this
Right.
exhibit hall.
Yeah. It's definitely intense. But yeah, I don't know how many vendors, 500 vendors or something. But if you're a one-man operation, two-man, three-man operation, and I think you pointed this out really good to a customer prospect the other day. If your person is telling you that they have cybersecurity completely under control, that's the time to raise the red flag, right? That's the time to throw the alarm off because there's always something that you should be improving. We talk about continuous improvement. It is overwhelming, and there's a lot there. So just the state of the way it is today is pretty crazy.
Yeah, you mentioned a conversation you had with a potential customer the other day that said that they had someone on their staff whose cybersecurity was a pet project of theirs.
Right.
And I think when you told me that, I was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
But I do think that, we were walking to this luncheon today with a superintendent, and we were talking about, how is a school supposed, with 3 to 5 staff, how are they really supposed to operate at that high level from a cybersecurity standpoint, right? And how are they supposed to have the level of expertise they need to have in order to actually protect the students' data, parents' data? And this is, happens. We talk about any time we see it in the news, but Minneapolis school district happened earlier this year. Colorado State of Education had a hack that happened earlier this year. And I think anyone who went to a Colorado school from like 2009 to 2023 or something like that, all of that information was accessed. And, Minneapolis, we were talking about like psych records and things, the psych evals that were sent to school counselors were leaked as a result of not paying the ransomware. So, you don't want your name tied to something like that, right?
No.
But how, if with 5 people, are you really going to protect at that level? And so I think it is something that when you see it in conversations, how do you know, as you interact with different schools or different customers that we're working with, how do you know there's a real problem? What are some of the flags that you see?
Cybersecurity is a kind of fundamental layered approach. There's not one solution you can buy that's the silver bullet. And
there were 500 vendors in that.
There's 500 vendors, and that's not necessarily good either because can be very disjointed and not talk together. And kudos to our security team; they've done an amazing job doing that. But if they think of it in a kind of unidimensional way, a single dimension, then that's kind of a concern because they're not grasping all that's involved and maybe have some blind spots on that.
Yeah.
I think of our security environment, our office, and part of this podcast, communicating with our team, and the reality is security makes things tougher in many ways, right?
Yeah.
And I always relate it to the TSA, right? Before 9/11, a lot of airports, you walk up to the gate and get on your plane. You didn't have all of that, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of a necessity to have that for keeping us secure. And so, when we even look at our staff and to our customers, it takes longer sometimes because we have these security pieces in place. And I think a lot of customers will come and say, well, we can just do that faster if we were managing this ourselves. And reality is well, it's not because we can't do things fast. It's because we're taking security first mindset, trying to protect our customers.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I took a look at our dashboard, and we took in 85 million data points in terms of security in our console that we're evaluating. Million. Isn't that insane?
That's unbelievable.
So, invisibility is one of the key ways to help fight that. But yeah, I think as I just kind of reflect on Black Hat and where it's at now and where it was a long time ago, it's only getting more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be able to execute at a high level is only going to get more and more complicated.
Right.
And ransomware attacks and things like that are going up, as well as social engineering hacks, right? That are, situations where people are calling in and saying, "Hi, I'm Brad Sant. Could you reset my password to 1234 Brad?" That would be the password you would use,
Wait,
right? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay,
Brad.
I got to change my password before
Just
this gets
change
released.
it to a capital B for Brad.
For sure.
Yeah. Exclamation point,
Yep.
probably.
So we're coming up on Labor Day here as we record this. You've been kind of in the operation seat for a couple months.
Yeah.
What do you see? What are we going into in the fall as we turn the corner around Labor Day?
Been really proud of the team. We've gone through a really busy season here, and it's been really fun to see people just jump together and really just see the team unite around. This is a busy time. We've got a lot of people that have been out for the summer and with at different customers and schools and things like that. And so it's been a lot of fun to see the team as our calls and tickets and everything climb every year at the beginning of school years and things like that. It's been really I've just been super encouraged with how the team has come together and united together and that's been just really fun to see across the board. I've seen some examples of extreme ownership that have really stepped up, and there's a whole group of people that went over, to one of the schools and just spent, probably 5 or 6 extra hours one night, just, tackling some projects. So really, really excited and proud for that team. I think, when I look at September here and when I look at moving into the fall, I'm really, really excited about getting to the point where we can just step back and reflect and start to make some plans even on how do we attack next year this time. And I don't want to.
You watching some film?
Oh yeah, I'm excited to go back and watch some film
Right.
and talk about it but put some things into place so that next year we've got really a timeline in place so that we can do some things differently and learn from this year. And so I want to schedule some film time for us to go back and actually look at it and I'm eager for that because I think that we've had some great ideas and we've done some things this year that have maybe gone better than years in the past. But I think we've got areas to improve, and so that's something I'm looking forward to in September and excited to grow, excited to scale. And I think that we're in a position where we can do that. And I'm excited to kind of see where we go from there. So how about you?
Well, I'd echo that staff has been incredible.
Yeah.
And most people don't understand the volume that we deal with on a annual basis this time
Yeah.
of year. It is overwhelming. It's more than you can typically handle, no matter how large you were. It's kind of building the church for Easter Sunday, and you just can't build it that way.
Yeah.
So staff has stepped up. They've gotten, I feel like really motivated at helping, and that also tells me culturally we're going in the right direction. We've got
Yeah.
people that not only care but are taking extreme ownership, starting to get to this championship mindset that we're going to be the best,
Yeah.
and not let anything go. So as I think about it, we talked elevated experiences, and 100% going into the fall. That's where my head is. We're going to do. We got a little secret going on that
Yeah.
we're going to have in
Wasn't sure if
September.
you're going to share a little bit about it.
That's a little secret, but we're going to have a company event that we really drive this elevated experience and celebrate getting through
Yeah.
kind of our back to school season. So, I think really it's going to be an exciting time, and we're only going to accelerate faster and faster, better service, elevated experience.
You have a quote in the men's bathroom that at least is the Mario Andretti. You want to share that quote?
Go ahead.
It's something along the lines of, if you're, I don't remember.
If everything's
under control, you're not going fast enough,
Yep,
right?
Yep. If everything's
And,
under control.
And so I think that, I'm excited looking into this fall because I feel like we're going to push down the gas pedal a little bit going into this fall. And we're going to take this next turn and it's going to be just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And that is the Menlo experience, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.